Americans do you think make New Year's resolutions? I hate people like you. Like, how much you think that car costs? $1 million. You like say some big number. You think 7 out of 10 human beings in the United States make New Year's resolutions every year? You're just trying to say something to be cool. Somebody's actually going to give you a real statistic. And everybody's scared to say anything. 41%. 41%. Which, when I read 41%, I thought that was a high number. But now Kumi's spoiled it because she said 70. 98%. You know, it's like when you play The Price is Right and somebody bets $1. It's like a strategy, but it kind of messes things up. Yeah, so I was surprised. I was surprised to find out that 41% of Americans make New Year's resolutions. And then the next question is, what percentage of people who make New Year's resolutions keep them? That's another question. You're no longer allowed to talk. 2%, you're also, all you people are bad. All you troublemakers, I'm not talking to you. What percentage of people who make New Year's resolutions keep them? 15, right? If 1 out of 7? 9%. I was also surprised by that number. I was surprised to find out that, north of 100 million people a year in this country alone make New Year's resolutions, and then over 90% of them fail. Fail in the first week, 23%. Fail in the first month, 43%. Hey, go tell Jody to stop making noise, and go tell the kids to stop making noise. Thank you. 41% of Americans make New Year's resolutions, 9% keep them. 23% fail in the first week, and an additional 43%, so now 2 out of 3, have failed by the end of January. Big numbers, right? Big numbers. 12% of people in 2007, it was 2017, 2007, it was 12% of people kept their promises. So we're going down. People are keeping their promises less than ever before. 83% of people were confident they were going to make it when they made their resolutions. The bulk of them were about health. Like 10% of people said they just forgot. Other people said they were unrealistic. But they were their own commitments they made that they later determined were unrealistic. I think those numbers are concerning. I think the fact that half the people in our country want to make New Year's resolutions and less than 1 in 10 keep them. 2/3 of the people fail in the first month. I think those are concerning numbers. How about marriage vows? Just to give it, here's another concerning number. Marriage vows. What percentage of people who they literally make a vow till death do us part. They try to troubleshoot it for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health. They try to troubleshoot it so that you can't get out. They clarify that getting sick or being poor, for better or for worse. See, I'm worse now. They cover that one. When you get married, The typical marriage vow says for better or for worse, for richer or for poor, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. That's the standard. So it's a vow to death, which is, by the way, what a mortgage means. A mort in mortgage means until death, you're obliged to pay it. Like mortuary, mortuis, mortician, all from mort. So people make a promise and they say, for richer or for poor, in sickness and in health, for better or for worse, so that doesn't get you out of trouble, till death do us part. It's specific. They're trying to troubleshoot. What percentage of people go on to get divorced in this country?
50%.
Yeah, it's 50%. You know what it is in India?
I don't know what they do in India.
It's 1%. 1% in India, 50% in the US. They have a saying in India. In India, you love the person you marry. In the West, you marry the person you love. But then you marry the person you love, and then when the love is gone, the marriage is gone. Go open that door. Somebody jump up. Come on. You love the person you marry, which turns love into a verb. You love the person you marry, which turns love into a verb. And so it's something that you can control. You marry the person you love. Love's still a verb there, but it becomes almost like a passive state. You love the person, therefore you marry. Almost a passive, past tense state. And then when you no longer love them, then you shouldn't be married to them anymore. As opposed to the marriage is what creates the obligation to love, and love is something you can willfully do. Seems like we're getting a little distracted. So let's try to refocus. It's discouraging for me when you guys are looking everywhere but here as a speaker. In India, they say you love the person you marry. And that's kind of an empowering statement because it indicates that you can willfully choose to love the person and execute acts of love, which is when you use love as a verb, that's what we're talking about. Love's also a noun, it's also a feeling. And then you marry the person you love. Creates more of a past tense, passive situation where you marry them because you love them, but then you could ask the question, well, what happens when I stop loving them? Well, then you stop being married to them. Whereas if you love the person you marry, then the act of marriage obligates you to then act in loving ways. And surprisingly, they found that when you behave when you serve people, you generate love for them. Which is easy to understand the truth of that. When you have a child, you serve your child, you feel intense love for your child, although they do nothing for you in particular. Especially not at the beginning. They just eat, pass stool, urine. They require constant care and attention. Mothers, it's an interesting statistic. Mothers who give birth for 2 years, suicide rates plummet. And it's practically no women commit suicide. It goes down to like nothing. Like 1/100th of normal rates for a year or two after women have a child. The act of having a child, it sometimes creates postpartum depression, but not suicide. Women feel like they have something to live for. It's far out, right? it's interesting, but if you start to talk about women sometimes argue they need to have abortions for health, but less than 1% of abortions are for health. But the health, if you were to match that against the drop in suicide rates, then there's no benefit from health. In fact, it's way more beneficial for society in terms of longevity and keeping people alive if everybody gave birth, because suicide rates go down, and it's way more than 1%. That, you guys following this? And it purported to be for health reasons. So, yeah, you serve your children when they do nothing for you. And it gives you a reason to live. And you feel intense love for them. Which is the proof that by acting in loving ways, you'll generate the feeling of love, which solves the whole conundrum that most people suffer from, which is why they can never figure out, oh, I don't love this person anymore. I'm not attracted to this person anymore. And they ignore that you can generate that. You can engineer that by acting in loving ways. Where's Ashtanga? That's not Ashtanga, it's your mom. So yeah, I think there's a crisis of untrustworthiness and inability to commit in this country. India, by the way, their divorce rates have multiplied by 20 over the last 50 years. So 50 years ago in India, the divorce rates were 1/20th of 1%. Now there's this huge disaster. It's 1%, but still 1/50th of what it is in the U.S. Oh, and if you get married again, your second marriage, 66%. Third marriage, 75%. It's weird, but it's not like people figure it out and get better. They get worse because they've broken the glass ceiling, and they've realized they can not keep their commitments, and there's no punishment. Maybe they get some money out of it, or some alimony or child support. They just, that lightning didn't strike them down, so that people actually get worse as time goes on. You think, oh, the start of marriage, I was young, second time around is way better. No. It gets worse and worse and worse. Second, third, fourth marriages get worse. Because it just gets cheaper. You know, even my grandfather, I don't recall my grandfather ever lying. Ever. Probably caught my dad in a lie or two, but not really. He would actually just refuse to answer. When he did something inappropriate and he got called out on it, he would just give you the silent treatment rather than lie. And when my dad would make commitments to me as a kid, generally speaking, he kept them. By the way, you should never tell your kid you might do something, because children don't work in might language. You say we might do something, and they think you are going to do something. And then when you don't do it, they feel like you've broken their trust. And when you say to them, no, I said I might, it doesn't get you any credit, because their brains don't work like that. Better just to not make that might commitment. We think we're exempted because you say might. Kids don't speak that language. So yeah, 41% of people, that shows we want to make commitments. 83% are confident. That shows we think we're going to keep our commitments. 9% keep their commitments. That's a disaster. And 66% fail within 1 month. 23% within a week. These are bad numbers. They're bad numbers. and 50% of people get divorced, 66 and 75 for second and third marriages, compared to an old world country, a backwards emerging economy like India, 1%. And okay, fine, maybe, but the thing is, people, when they get married, it's till death do us part, for better or for worse. It's not a light promise. It's a big commitment. Commitment means you do it even though you don't want it. That's why it's called a commitment. That's what, you know, when you sign a contract, it means you don't, just because you don't feel like it anymore, get to not do it. That's the whole purpose of the contract. That's the whole purpose of a commitment. That's the whole purpose of legal commitments that people make, is so that you won't break that commitment, and you're not allowed to. And you even include language, like in a marriage commitment, that says, till death do us part, for better or for worse. Precisely because you're trying to communicate to the other party, I'm never going to go back on that commitment. Even now, like in our Indian congregation, nobody gets divorced. It's so rare. It's unusual. One member of our congregation might get divorced in a decade or something. It's like, and even then, it's like, you meet divorced people from India, and it's like weird. It's like you're meeting a leper or something like that. But in the West, you meet somebody who's not divorced, and it's surprising. Like, I've been married 26 years. It's surprising. I married my first love. My wife married her first love. I've never been with anybody else except for my wife. My wife's never been with anybody else except for me. Been married for half my life. I have 6 kids, all of them with my wife. My wife has 6 kids, all of them with me. We waited till we got married to be intimate. It's like, I'm atypical. But I'm not. In India, I'm not. But in the West, I'm unusual. I used to be, people kept their word. People would give their word was legally binding. In old world society, like in Japan, the feudal period, if you gave your word verbally, that was a contract. Just to say, I'm going to do this, was enough. People used to give their word and like die behind it. You know, we hear speeches like Winston Churchill, we will fight them on the beaches, fight them on the ocean, we'll fight them with great strength and growing confidence in the air. We'll defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We will never surrender. That was a speech he gave during World War II. We'll never surrender. People were inspired by that. I mean, England was leveled, destroyed during World War II. We appreciate people who never surrender. There's a guy named David Goggins, an insane athlete, Navy SEAL athlete. People love him because he'll go on a 50-mile run. So I'm going to run 50 miles. His feet will be bleeding. He's got a broken leg, whatever. He's limping along. He's been on the road for 56 hours. He just won't quit. He never quits. I'm going to do 1,000 pull-ups. Do 1,000 pull-ups. He gets to the point where he's doing 1 or 2 pull-ups at a time, but he'll never quit. He'll just keep doing one, wait a few seconds, do another one. It's insane. People love him. I think people love him because it makes a commitment and keeps it. Something that used to be quite common. That people just don't lie. They don't make promises if they're not going to keep them. Sometimes people have prenups when they get married, which is an interesting concept. That you get married and make a lifelong vow, but then you plan to break your lifelong vow while making it. And set yourself up to break the commitment and divorce as a precursor to making the lifelong commitment. It's just Just have a civil union. Just have a civil union without all the bells and whistles. But it's very bad for you to make a commitment and not keep it. As evidenced by the fact that the second time around, 2/3. Third time around, 3/4 of people get divorced. They learn it's okay to break my word. It's okay. You can get away with it. It doesn't count. It's like when you tell your children not to do something or else, and then they do it anyway, and you don't make the or else come true. They learn. My parents are liars. If I just push the envelope, I'll get away with stuff. My wife said to kids, you better do this or else. I'm counting to 10. This is your last warning. I never do that. I'll say to my kids, come here right now. Count to 3. 1, 2, 3. And if they haven't come to me by the time I get to 3, I jump up from wherever I am, I run to where they are, I pick them up, and I move them where I want them to be. From the age of 10 months or something, from the time they can understand. And my children, even today, obey me. I tell my adult children, come here, they come immediately. They've been trained. I never don't follow through. My kids never listen to them. My wife invokes me. If you don't do that, I'm going to tell your father. She has to do that. You follow? Because she's always given these, because she's lazy. She doesn't know, my wife's not lazy. She works very hard. But she just doesn't want to follow through. I follow through. It matters. When you meet people who do what they say, when you meet people who follow through on their commitments, when you meet people who don't lie, who tell you like it is, make commitments and keep them, even when it's not easy, which is why they're called commitments, because you're supposed to do them when it's difficult. That's why it's called a commitment and not just, I feel like it today. When you meet people like that, you treat them differently. You take them more seriously. You respect them. You trust them. You can depend on them. And so it's like a light thing. 40% of Americans make New Year's resolutions, and less than 10% keep them. I think that's toxic. And you're better off not making a New Year's resolution. I think it's toxic. Because you start training yourself. I can just make a bunch of noise and not do anything. And give my word and not keep it. I don't like people like that. I don't trust people like that, with good reason. I don't depend on people like that. People start breaking their word to me, they get relegated to a lower platform. In contrast, people who keep their commitments, their position in my life gets elevated. It's interesting, I was thinking about today, Krishna, he uses language all throughout the Gita about devotees. And he speaks, he's always like Nitya Viyuktanam, they're always yoked to me. Nitya Yukta Upaste, they're always yoked to me through worship. Yatantas Tridcha Dridha Brataha, they strive towards me with great vows. Machita Mukata Prana, they think of me and their lives are dedicated to me. Tesham Satata Yuktanam Bhajatam Pratipurvam, they're always worshiping me with great love. Krishna speaks in such glorifying language about his devotees. And their defining feature is satata, always, nitya, always. They're always connected to him. They're always thinking about him. Yomam smarati nitya satasya sulabham bhata. They're always remembering me. I'm easy to achieve for them. They're always yoked to me. I carry them what they lack, I preserve what they have. They're always worshiping with love. Satata yukta nam bhajatam pratipurkam. And therefore, te sham dadami buddhi yogam. I give them wisdom. And therefore, for them, te sham evanukam bhartam, out of great compassion, I destroy the darkness of ignorance in their hearts with the shining lamp of knowledge. Satatam kirtan. They're always doing kirtan about it. Yatantascha dridhabhata. They're sworn to me with great vows. They're always striving towards me. Krishna uses this kind of language throughout the Gita to describe a healthy relationship between the soul and God. And the healthy relationship between the soul and God is one characterized by constant, abiding devotion, love, service, faith, unfailing devotion, constant, eternal, committed. I think Krishna's on to something. I think that's what we're looking for. I think that's what we're looking for just in our relationships with people we can depend on. And I think that's what Krishna's looking for in a relationship. Krishna, of course, always keeps his word, always keeps his commitments. He's God. He's a constant. He's not the variable. He's the axiom. He's a Pythagorean theorem. He's the thing you can always count on. He's Planck's constant. You can set your clock to him. We're the variable. And a healthy soul is someone who rises up to a level where they can make and keep that kind of commitment towards Krishna. In some ways, our whole religion is really severe. We convince you to start chanting some japa, we make it easy. I just chant 10 minutes. And we build you up where you're chanting for a couple hours a day. And then we say, hey, you should get initiated. And being initiated means you make a lifelong vow that you'll chant 2 hours a day, every day, for the rest of your life. We're not like a Sunday religion. We're a 7-day-a-week, 365-day, forever religion. Where we convince people, you should be vegetarian. Now make a vow to be vegetarian forever. You should be sober. Now take a vow to be sober for the rest of your life. You should be chaste. Now take a vow to be chaste for the rest of your life. You should chant. Now take a vow to chant every day for the rest of your life. Oh, you want to worship deities? Oh, then you have to do it 365 days a year forever. Like just on our little altar here at our temple, 25, 30 hours of puja per day. 7 days a week. Starting at 4 a.m., finishing at 9 p.m. 7 days a week. Without a single interruption. I've been here 25 years. We've never missed a day. There's a whole department of pujaris that come and continue to worship and never fail. And it's not light. It's like all day long from 4 a.m. until 9 p.m. 5 artis a day. Multiple food offerings have to be prepared every day. Garlands every day. They have to be bathed and dressed every day. It's so much work. Our whole scene is every day, 7 days a week. We don't start off with people. We just dip your toe, see how you like it. But eventually, like, oh, this is good? Yeah, why don't we commit to it for life? You get a day off a month? No. A couple days a month, you got to fast too. We just start adding stuff. current. It's not like we're the only ones doing this game. Good Catholics chant the rosary every day. Good Catholics go to Mass every day. Good Muslims face Makkah 5 times a day. Make prayers 5 times a day. It's not like we're the only group that does this. Good Jews keep kosher. Good Muslims only eat halal. We're just like, you know, and they have to change their life. Seriously, change their life. I think a well-kept vow, a well-kept commitment, a well-kept resolution is a beautiful thing. It's just your honor and your integrity and your ability to keep commitments and your trustworthiness is sacred. And you shouldn't lightly break your commitments because you erode away at your own trustworthiness even to yourself. You don't even believe yourself. You're making commitments you don't even believe you're going to do it. I want to speak of anybody else. Anybody else is a fool for believing you. You don't even have faith in yourself. You start breaking commitments, you lose faith in yourself. What a horrible situation to not be able to trust yourself. Our word, our honor, our integrity, which is your ability to live up to your values, is special. It's actually a defining feature of human beings. Animals don't make commitments. They just act on impulse. Only human beings make commitments. Only human beings articulate their commitments to others, articulate their commitments to themselves. We think in language, recursive language. Human beings are the only species that can say, I'm going to the store with my friend on this day to buy this thing for this party, in this neighborhood, in this car, at this time, and stack ideas on top of each other without limit, and have an infinite amount of ideas that can be communicated. Human beings are the only species that do that. Recursive language. And recursive language goes on in your head. You think in language. And so we're the only species that can make a commitment to ourselves and to others because language is required to make a commitment. And other animals have language, but they don't have recursive language. Recursive language is required to make a commitment. And so we're special. And we shouldn't take our special ability and misuse it, otherwise you lose it. Integrity is fragile. You start not living up to your values, you lose your integrity. It's tough to get it back. You start to become habituated to failing, to not keeping your word. We should be scared of that. Better just be silent. Don't make a commitment you can't keep. One of my elders was here maybe 10, 15 years ago. Trained me as a monk. We lived together. He trained me. He's 68 now. I'm 51. So 17 years my senior. When I joined the monastery, I was 17. He was 34, so twice my age. And he adopted me. We lived together. Very strict. Lifelong celibate monk. Very strict. He was sitting here on this bench with me about 15 years ago. I was in my late 30s, maybe early 40s. He said, hey, enough with this wrestling, jiu-jitsu stuff. You're too old for it. Stop it. I'm like, hey, Prabhu, I gave up a lot of stuff. I've only been with one person my whole life romantically. I'm sober since I was 16 years old. I'm vegan since I was 16 years old. I gave up a lot of stuff. Maybe just let me have this like It's one thing. It's not that bad. He's like, all right. But he said, I want your commitment now. You're going to stop. And I didn't want to give him my commitment. So I was like, please don't ask that of me. I don't want to disrespect you by saying no to you. Because you're my elder. And I'm indebted to you. At the same time, I don't want to make the commitment you want me to make. So I'm humbly requesting you to take a look at my life and how much I've given up. And maybe just allow me this hobby. Please allow me this hobby. It's okay. You can have it. But I was freaked out. My elder came, asked me for something. I'm obliged to say yes. I didn't want to say yes. I didn't want to lie to him. I did the math right there on the spot. And I said, would you please rescind your request? Essentially, I asked him to rescind his request. In which he kindly obliged and did. I take my commitment seriously. I don't make promises like that. Because I want to trust myself. I want to be able to counter myself. I want to be able to give my word and mean it and follow through. That's kind of my thing. I became a devotee when I was 17. I've been doing the same thing every single day for 34 years. 2/3 of my life, I've been doing the same thing every single day. I never miss a day. It's always the same thing. The hours of stuff I do every single day, no matter what. It matters to me. Built my whole life on that. My ability to keep my word. I don't want to make cheap New Year's resolutions and start selling that. I don't want to make life commitments and start to become untrustworthy. There's a statement in the Gita, dishonor is worse than death. It's the Gurkhas' motto. The Gurkhas are this like little people race in Nepal. It's so violent. It took the British Empire 10 years to defeat them in the mountains. And they were fighting them with sticks and knives. The British had their full military apparatus behind them, and they declared them a martial race. They declared them a martial race. And to this day, they have a Gurkha contingent in the British SAS Special Forces. They're like, it's insane. When you want to travel up in the Himalayas, you got to go to the Gurkhas. They carry your stuff on their head and like run ahead of you. They oxygenate their blood better. They get more oxygen in through their lungs. At high altitude, they got more oxygen. They climb Everest all the time. The Sherpas are Gurkhas. They climb Everest all the time without oxygen, set up the ladders and the ropes that everybody else uses with oxygen. That stuff all gets set up by these people. They're the best climbers in the world. They test them. They get more oxygen in their blood than anybody else. There was, in World War II, they were flying over Myanmar, fighting a war there against the Japanese. And the British conscripted them into military service. And they were going to parachute in. There was a British colonel who wrote about this in his memoirs. And they were talking about parachuting in. And the soldiers looked a little concerned. And they were talking in Nepali. Maybe they even have a Gurkha language. I think it's probably Nepali. They were talking amongst themselves. And then the commander of the Gurkhas, who spoke English, said, hey, the soldiers are just asking, could you fly as low as possible? And the commander said, but if we fly low, your parachutes won't open. And then there was like a big, oh, there's parachutes? Oh, okay, then you can You can fly from any height you want to. But you guys were so committed. They were prepping to jump out of a plane with no parachute, just asking to fly close to the tree line with the idea that they would then hit the trees and maybe some of them would survive. Just some years ago, I was in India and I read in the newspaper. It's kind of a common thing in India. They'll fell a log, or fell a tree, put a log across train tracks. The train will be forced to stop, and then dacoits, brigands, highwaymen board the train, rape, kill, and loot. And so there was a retired Gurkha special forces operative on the train. And 30 armed men stop the train, board the train, were killing dozens of people, raped a bunch of women, and robbed the train. And he was just sitting there, minding his own business. And the criminals, there's 30 of them. So there's no fighting, you're going to die. There's 30 of them. And they came into his car and began to sexually assault the girl in the car. And she cried out to him and said, "Uncle, how can you let them do this to me?" And he was like sitting there, and he just had enough. He jumped up, took out his kukra, which is a kind of a curved, sort of mini scimitar. Kukra? Kukri. It's kind of like a curved mini scimitar knife that's popular in Nepal amongst the Gurkhas. He took out his kukri and he killed 12 men single-handedly. And freaked on the train, just with a knife. They had guns. He just walked through the train, slaughtering people. And they broke the whole thing up. They ran away. They wrote about it. I wanted to give him a whole medal. He just bailed, didn't want to have anything to do with it. But he was trying to mind his own business. And the girl insulted his honor. How can you let them do this to me? And that was it. He exploded. And we hear about people like this. And it matters. It matters. Sometimes people make bad vows, like they had the 3 alls in World War II. Japan had a 3 alls policy. Kill all, loot all, burn all, towards China. China had risen up against Japan, the Imperial Army in 1940. Japan was angry about it, so the war crimes the Japanese committed are on par with the Nazi war crimes. It's not as popular. They didn't do as big a numbers, but they devastated China, they devastated the Philippines, Taiwan. It was horrific what they did. Destroyed entire generations. I had to pay reparations, actually, make apologies, but their crimes were horrific. We read about it. Japan had a total war policy, as did Nazi Germany. Goebbels talked about 1943, but eventually Hitler embraced it. The total war was that every man, woman, and child was called up to arms. And they were supposed to use every single resource in their entire country to fight against the enemy. So by the time we bombed Nagasaki and Hiroshima, they were taking pitchforks. Farmers were being told to take up pitchforks and fight against the U.S. military with pitchforks. Ho Chi Minh did the same thing in Vietnam. They said, we'll lose 10 men to each of your 1, and we'll still win, because we'll never give up. Enemy on their home territory, on their homeland, no matter what you do to them, they're never defeated, because they have nowhere to go, because it's their homeland. They just get more entrenched and more expert and more hardened and more hateful, and there's no way to win. You can never invade another country and beat them into submission, because they live there forever, and they will always outlast you. You got to win their hearts. You can't just be with your boot on their neck. So sometimes people make these vows of like never giving up and never starting for the worst reasons possible. And they wreak havoc in the world. But if you can learn the art of making commitments and keeping them, and you make good commitments, no commitment being better than your commitment to God, you can change the world, change your heart, change your community, change the world. You get a small group of people together who make commitments and keep them, whose word is their bond, who never lie, who always do what they say they're going to do, who are devoted. They're the most powerful people ever. Their strength is undeniable. They always win. And they inspire people. We should become such people. And in service of that, we shouldn't just cheaply make New Year's commitments. We should make our commitments slow and steady, incrementally, like a tortoise, inch by inch, and then keep it. And watch your prestige and your reputation and your accolade grow as well as your influence. And you can encourage other people to make such commitments, become better versions of themselves, and the world becomes a better place just by you learning to do what you said you're going to do. And the very fact that 41% of people want to make commitments, the very fact that people still take marriage vows instead of having civil unions, the very fact that we venerate people who make great speeches about their commitment, the very fact that we glorify people who keep their commitment and write newspaper articles about it and follow them on Instagram proves that it's still there. We've just gotten really impoverished and really weak. And we should reverse course. Like simple. You have any recollection of your father ever lying, Rupanuga? You have any recollection of your father giving his word and not keeping it? No recollection, right? Zero, right? Rupanuga Prabhu is almost 70, 65 plus. How old are you?
66.
Yeah, he's 66. So then his father's going to be 25 years older than him, approximately. So his father would be 90 plus. So now he was born, a long time ago, like almost a century ago. You get it? And he's from India. And from rural India, right? And so that automatically takes you back another 200 years. Being from India, you get an extra 100 year. Because like 100 years more pious you follow. And then being from rural India, you're 100 years more pious than that. So it's going back to the kind of people who were around, 300 years ago in this country. And 300 years ago in the U.S., if you gave your word, if you told somebody, I give you my word, that was it. No contract required. Your word was legally binding. You were in front of a judge. Did you give me your word? Oh, then that's it. That's how the world operated. Like the average human being never gave their word and didn't keep it. The average human being kept their word upon pain of death. You know early Christians? Most people don't know this. Early Christians thousands of them got killed by the Romans. The Romans were big pagans, hated the Christians. Thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of Christians were killed over the first centuries after Christ. And the rule was, if you renounced Jesus, they wouldn't kill you. And when I say they kill you, like they'd boil you in oil. They'd have you torn apart by lions. They would crucify you upside down. Like, you think Jesus had it bad? They'd crucify you upside down. It's way worse. Way worse. They were like masters of torture. Horrible torture. And they were like that bloodlust. They did it in the Colosseum. People watched it. It was like a national pastime. You can read about it. It was a national pastime. They killed people, executed people publicly, tortured people publicly. And like the crowds were into it. And the Christians were the object of their disdain. And they suffered tremendously. And to not get killed as a Christian, all you had to do was just say, I renounce Jesus, I give up Jesus. And the early Christians were so committed that they'd be told, will you renounce Jesus? No, we're going to kill you. Yeah, sorry, not going to do it. We're going to torture and kill you, okay? And they refused to go back. They could have been like, yeah, I renounce, but in their hearts not renounced. They refused to even do that. They were so committed. It's not even my religion, and I venerate people like that. You got nothing you die for, you got nothing to live for. And dying's easy. It's just a one-time thing. You really want to show that you're committed? Live for something. Chant japa every day for the rest of your life. Eat a non-violent diet for the rest of your life. Don't kill animals. Don't eat animals. Be sober for the rest of your life. Be faithful for the rest of your life. Make promises and keep them. Makes you a king. Makes you the richest person on the planet. Makes you the most famous person on the planet. Makes you the best of people. Makes you the most dependable, the most trustworthy, the most successful, the most human, the most divine. And you turn that energy towards Krishna, and that's what he speaks about in the Gita. Satata yukta nam, nityabhi yukta nam. Satatam kirtayanto mam, yatatascha dridha brata, over and over again. Yomam smarati nityasa. Over and over, he talks about his devotees who always remember him, always think about him, always talk about him, always take vows to him, always keep their vows to him, are always connected to him, are always chanting about him. And then he responds and says, Yoga kshemam vamyam, I carry what they lack, preserve what they have. Dadami buddhiyam, I give them wisdom. Nashayam yatma bhavasa, I destroy the darkness in their hearts. Samudharta bhavami, I become their deliverer. Because Krishna can trust you. You commit to him, he can fully manifest his commitment to you, and miracles happen. And your life becomes perfect. So, whatever, take a New Year's vow, don't. Just be one of the 9% to keep it, whatever. But not one of the 91% that don't. Definitely don't be one of the 66% that break it the first month. But even more than necessarily taking a New Year's resolution cheaply in one day, think about the nature of commitment. Think about the kind of person you want to be. Think about the level of integrity you want to have. Think about the value of being trustworthy to yourself. Think about the value of being trustworthy to your community. Think about the example that sets for other people. Wrap your head around essentially the essence of human life, which is the ability to make big commitments and keep them. And orient yourself, that's what I want. And then start to edge yourself in that direction, step by step, moment by moment. Thank you very much. Happy New Year, Irish. Did I didn't put those on.
That's perfect.
Yeah, you should fall.